Art of Adventure. This is episode 272 with David Wood. The Art of Adventure is the podcast where we look at unconventional lifestyles, peak performance, human potential, entrepreneurship, and cutting-edge science. I'm your host, lead explorer, and guide, Derek Loudermilk. You can go to derekloudermilk.com to check out the show notes for this episode and all the other things that we talk about, links and whatnot in this episode. And on that website, you can find more information about working with me, about upcoming book projects, workshops, and events. And want to quickly announce that Superconductors, the book that I wrote that came out last year about the future of work and optimizing your career, is available on audiobook. So you can find that at Audible. That's Superconductors. On today's show, David Wood is back for his record-setting 4th podcast appearance. And last time he was on the show, he was talking about this game that he created to get real with people. And he's essentially taken that work even further this time. And he's working with executives and prison inmates on authentic relating and how to play for real. But before we get to the segment where we dive into his current work, actually, I realized that David is one of the best learners in the world. And we've had some really great super learners on the show, people who are experts at skill development and memory and language learning and all kinds of things. And so I wanted to actually deconstruct how David does this, because he didn't even realize that he was so good at it. So this is kind of cool. You can hear him discover how he's actually really good at learning. So some of the other things we talk about in this episode is how David is reinventing his coaching business. At one point, he had the world's largest life coaching business back in the 90s, and he was Google ranked #1 for life coaching. And he essentially left that business behind, was basically an Airbnb host when I first met him in Bali. I think the first episode we recorded was from his Airbnb house that, on the balcony, we were overlooking the jungle. And now he's gotten way back into coaching and he's redefining his coaching practice. So we talk a little bit about that. And here are some of the other things we get into: how David identifies when people are doing the wrong thing by their tone of voice, their nonverbal communication, what happens when you withhold your truth and how to combat that. We talk about the balance of perseverance with cutting your losses and what to do when you start a project and it starts to fizzle out. So there's just a ton of really good stuff in here from a master coach. So I know you're going to enjoy this episode with David Wood. David Wood, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. I notice I'm happy just being with you again. You were my first podcast interview ever.
That's great. You were like, because we did a double. So I was just looking back. Your episode 49, 50, and 152. And the way you pitched it, you were like, I'm an expert interview guest. Why don't we just go ahead and do 2 interviews? And I was like, That sounds right. That sounds reasonable.
Well, I'd done a lot of radio and I'd done some TV, but I don't know if I'd done a podcast. And since then, I think I've recorded 30 interviews, 30 podcasts. But this will be the first podcast I've ever appeared on 3 times. In fact, now 4, I guess.
Yeah.
4 episodes. So I feel a bit like a podcast slut. And thank you for always being my first.
Yeah, this is really cool, and I think you do have the record for most appearances. So, and we've been friends in different contexts, teammates. You've taught me about the coaching business. We've gone to a lot of overlapping social circles when we were both living in Bali. Now you're in Boulder, place where I used to live, and hopefully I'll get out there soon.
Yeah, and I just realized, even on a more personal side for me, I think at one time we were both interested in the same woman. And I remember us having a candid conversation about it, which a lot of people skip over. And I really appreciated how you showed up for that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that was actually the very messy time in my life when I was about to become a dad. And
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out all that. Makes me a little uncomfortable thinking about it right now, but everything worked out.
Well, I'm glad we've gone there. I know we're going to talk about daring on here, but these topics, the uncomfortable stuff, I think that's where the gold is. That's where our edge is. That's where the chances for growth are, and that gave me a deeper connection with you. It wasn't easy for me to talk to you about it as well. And in that conversation, I surprised myself. I found that I was backing you. Even though I wanted to date this woman, I found that I was backing you and coaching you on what you could do with this woman. So you gave me a chance to transform. And this uncomfortable, this vulnerability, I really think that takes daring, and that leads to the stuff that we ultimately want, which definitely I want, which is deeper connection.
And I'm actually starting to break a sweat thinking about it because it was such a stressful time. And I was just giving a talk the other day, and I was telling another story about this low point in my career, trying to figure out what I was doing, and I started breaking into a sweat. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is going horribly. Like, they can see me sweating. And the feedback afterwards was like, I really resonated with that particular story where you were uncomfortable. I was like, oh, please don't tell me that I have to be uncomfortable all the time for people to start connecting with me.
Well, not all the time, but I'm reading a book by Brené Brown right now, Dare to Lead.
Yes.
And she's so big on vulnerability, and people now apparently in the corporate setting are using the word rumble. All right, let's rumble about this. Let's bring up the difficult stuff. Let's sit with the discomfort until we get the gold that's here. And I love that, because if we gloss over it, I think it bites us in the ass ultimately, and we miss that opportunity to know ourselves and to know others.
It's possible that we could jump right into this, but actually I was really thinking that we could start with there's a lot of things where you take deep dives, and I've noticed you like quickly get really good at various skills, including frisbee, paragliding. You mentioned chess. There's and I think you told me once, like, you really love to sort of take a deep dive and deconstruct certain skills. So I'd be curious, maybe on a broader sense, like where that comes from inside you that you get obsessed about these things.
Wow. Well, one motivator is I don't like to lose. I really hate to lose. So I'd much rather be good at something and feel really powerful with it. And I am very competitive. But I realized too, I wouldn't call paragliding a good example, because I think I was just a standard student. I didn't dive into that like crazy. I just went and did the courses, and then I wish if I had dived into it like crazy, the way I do with other things, I may not have broken my back in Colombia last year.
I did not realize that you did that.
Yep. My chute collapsed, and I landed on my ass, and I fractured my spine and went to hospital in an ambulance. And it's because I wasn't a world-class student, because I didn't deep dive into it. I just did the courses, and then I flew. And I was smart enough to ask instructors for advice, and I had an instructor on the radio when I had the accident, but I didn't become a world-class student at that. So I guess that's a good example of not doing it. But when it comes to bughouse chess and frisbee and learning Balinese, I was an uncommon student. That's true. Now, the Balinese wasn't competitive. There was no one to compete with, because no one learns Balinese.
Right.
Like it's ridiculous. You can go there and meet 1,000 tourists, and you might meet 2 or 3 who can say 3 words. That's it. I think I just didn't want to half do it. I wanted to really converse with people, and there weren't training courses on it. Even the books were bad. So I had to think, I'm a trainer myself. I'm like, how do I teach this to other people, and how do I teach this to myself? And so with Balinese, I hired somebody to read out the lines of the book in Balinese, and then I would read them out in English and record those. So I created my own training track so I could listen to it, and he would say, Singi dang me belanja. And then I would say, I can't buy this. Sing la pièce. I don't have money. And then I'd test myself. I'd hear the Balinese and I'd leave a space for me to say it. And then I would say it and give myself the answer. And then I created a dictionary. And then I created flashcards. And the local language school asked me if they could borrow my dictionary.
It's amazing.
They were teaching Balinese. Yeah. Flashcards are an amazing way to learn anything, because we read something, or we're not going to retain it. But if you read something and create some questions for yourself, little flashcards, and then do that afterwards and test yourself, your brain gets activated and the information gets stored.
And so what's the difference? Like, there's a few parts of that skill. There's like just memorizing the words, but then there's also the physical movements of your mouth, and
yeah,
but it's a little bit less physical than a sport. So how do you compare learning a language and a sport like Frisbee?
Interesting. Well, I happen to have a natural flair for languages. My pronunciation is usually better than the average person, and I have really good recall. So that's my superpower. When it comes to actually comprehending what they're saying, I'm the same as everybody else. But I have a superpower with that. With Frisbee, I didn't have any natural flair for it. I felt quite clumsy. But with each of them, it took massive repetition. So I'm now seeing the comparison with the language. I created the dictionary, I did the research, I created the training materials, and then I tested myself with repetition. With Ultimate Frisbee, I got some coaching from some friends, and then I went online and I watched the videos, and I would go out in the backyard with 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 Frisbees, and I would try what the guy said. And I was pretty bad at it. And then it kept on going. And then something clicked. And I'm like, whoa, wait, what? Oh, forehand, isolating the wrist. What if I don't use any arm and I just throw like that? And it was stable. Like, aha. And then I'd go and teach it to Sarah. We'd go and we'd do 2 hours every day, which actually was a way of me combating depression at the time, because I was depressed. I'd go outside, and for 2 hours out in the sun moving, I was fine. I was normal. And I'd teach it to her, and she'd get it faster than I got it, because I'd already found the way in. And so gratifying. So we'd kind of practice and practice and practice and practice. And I got good. I'm still seeing all the levels of where I could go, but I got good really fast from that.
And so I think a lot of people probably, when it comes to the part where when they're not good at it or not getting it, and there's, a beginner at whatever stage.
Oh.
And so like, what keeps you going through that where other people might just be like, oh, this is hard. I'm not that interested.
I love that you brought that up. There's a humility that's required for any student. I hate it. I hate being bad at something. So sometimes I do give up, like golf. I just suck at it, so I won't touch it. I've tried so many times. We talked about vulnerability right in the beginning. It's vulnerable to be bad at something, to play the piano and just have it be all clunky and whatever, to play the guitar and have it not sound good. Your question was, what is it that has me push through that when some people may not?
Right.
It might be, that's really interesting. I'm now remembering salsa. So I took 30 lessons in 30 days.
Okay.
In Colombia, right? I kind of believe if you're going to do something, why half do it? Why not fully do it? And I'm here in Colombia. Let's do an immersion and see what that's like. Now, with that one, I know I'm getting a bit off topic, but I recorded our lessons on video. Once we did, say, 3 or 4 moves and I could do them, I'd record them on video and write out after the lesson, once she left my apartment, the steps. And I did that so that if I forgot a move, I could just look at the video. And now I knew there'd be gaps where I don't do salsa, and I'm going to want to go back to it one day. So I tell you what, I reckon in a day, I'll be able to get back to those moves because of the training materials I've created for myself.
Does this live like in a external hard drive, and you carry around like the Balinese training materials and the salsa training materials wherever you go, just in case?
Yeah, I have it on my computer, and I uploaded those to YouTube so that I could always find them forever on my YouTube channel. And Balinese, if I go back to Bali, I'll spend at least a week refreshing, testing myself, listening to the audios, which I think are on my phone and on my computer. Yeah. So I guess this is I didn't realize that this is a tool I'm using, but creating your own course. What does that look like for you? I'm reading Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. I'm taking quotes from that book and pasting them in an article and publishing the article so that I'll be able to go back. This is my own training course for Dare to Lead, and I'll be able to read those and then boom, come to an interview and just spout all that material. Or I can send a client to it and say, you read this, and if you love it, you can read the book, and then I'll guide you through. Because once I've rocked it, then I teach it. So you can create your own course. Now, to your question, I love your questions. The question of what has me pushed through. Well, you know what? I could have given up at salsa, because you go there with a bunch of people who've already done 5 or 6 lessons, and they run through the stuff pretty fast. Mm-hmm. And I got lost. And then they're like, all right, grab a partner and dance. Are you kidding? With these women who know how to dance, and I'm fumbling, I don't know one move. I tell you what, embarrassing. And I do not like that feeling. So I had a choice: stop or get really good. Those are my 2 choices. So I hired a teacher, and that was wonderful. She's showing me step by step. I learned a few moves. Then when I went to the class, people are watching me to see how to do it.
But before you went to the sort of group class again, you up-leveled your skills sort of in private.
I was doing them in tandem. So I kept going, and I really felt like an idiot, and that was hard. But I also knew that I was going to catch up and I was going to get this. And then I love that feeling. I think that's maybe what motivates me, that feeling of being really awesome and being able to dance with a great dancer and not feel like an idiot. I'm realizing same thing happened when I went to 5 Rhythms, which is, for people who don't know, is a dance practice where you don't speak and there's no guidance. They just play music for 2 hours and you move. That was so hard for me. I went back to my high school days of feeling like such a jerk and an idiot, and looking at the girls and like, how do I connect with them? I can't even talk with them. I can't dance with them. Everyone's looking at me is how it felt. I really could have given up that, but there was such an intuition in me that this was right for me. Plus I was single, and there were amazing, gorgeous women. So I got a lot of dates.
Okay.
Out of doing that, and those 2 things pushed me through that discomfort, that massive discomfort. Now I can go to that dance floor and I can just move for me. My body knows what it wants to do, but I didn't have that when I first went.
Interesting. You brought up this, like the fact that you were working on your salsa with an instructor in between the other classes where you're also working on salsa. There used to be this actually when I lived in Boulder and was racing bikes, you would run into people when you were out secret training and they were out secret training. And so it was this thing, like people would rock up to the start line and they'd be like, oh, I haven't been riding that much. Like I'm out of shape. And then they would commence to just destroy the field and ride away from everybody. And you're like, what? This guy is like so amazing. And then, later the next week, you'd be out like 50 miles out in the mountains, nobody else around, and you like see someone coming up this old dirt road. And you're like, who is that? And that's the guy that said he hadn't been training. And
wow.
And then, but then you I started to realize that all these guys would secret train. They would downplay how hard they were actually working because they wanted to just show up and be really good. So I don't know if that's, it sounds similar. I don't know if that's a guy thing or if it's universal skill
I love it
thing,
as I love it as a motivator. It's like I'm going to be witnessed, and in how good I am. I did that with Bughouse. So I went to Bughouse Chess, which is 4 players playing on 2 boards. It's a team game and it's timed. You know Bughouse, and it's insane. It's so fast and chaotic, and you really need to try and track 2 boards at once while you've got 2 to 5 minutes to play your entire game. And I got thrashed. I wasn't even a chess player. I got thrashed. I hated that. So again, it's either quit or get really good. And I thought, how do I get good at this? And I went online to see what was available, and I found people were playing online. Now, none of the guys at the Bughouse Chess Group knew about the online training. They just came along and they're just playing. They're casual players. I went and played 7,000 games online. And you know what? I didn't lose very much anymore. The other thing I did is I bought a book, and I didn't even know chess notation. So it was painful for me to read the book and see what they're telling me in chess notation. It was like getting a book in Spanish when you don't know Spanish. And I would have to decipher it bit by bit. And then again, I'm seeing a theme here. I created my own training materials. I created a video using a chess app, and I would do the moves in the video and explain what the book had just taught me and create the tutorial that should have existed already that said, if someone does this opening, here's how to counter it. And here are the most powerful opening. I still have them somewhere on my website, and some people have found them and appreciated them. I didn't lose very much anymore. I even pissed off some of the guys. They're like, I used to be the number 2 guy here, and now you just come in and just look at that. And I started coaching them. I'm like, look, do you want to know why that doesn't work? And some people are like, yeah. I'm like, all right, you got to do this, 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 and this. And if they do this, then you do this. If they do this, this is what you do. I love that feeling of mastery. It's wonderful.
So I happened to be roommates with one of the top ranked chess players when I started college. He was my roommate. They just paired us. And you know how when you sort of hang around people, you start to be interested in what they're interested in. So I started watching him play chess, and he could play an entire room of people at the same time, 30 boards or something. And I started learning a lot about chess and joined the chess club for a little bit before I started playing Bughouse with my roommates. And I started to see the world differently. I started to see people, and I would characterize them. I'm like, oh, that person's a pawn, that person's a bishop. And I would like see someone walking across the hall. I was like, you should be moving diagonally because you're a bishop. And so I'd be walking across the quad of campus, and like everyone was a chess piece, and I would like start superimposing boards down over 3D reality. And
wow.
And so it was weird because it just like was happening to me. But I'm wondering, like, as you're learning anything, if you have similar experiences where like you start thinking in Balinese, or you start thinking in chess, or start thinking, like whatever it is that you're learning, if you see the world differently.
Yeah. Well, firstly, when I was playing so much chess, I'd be having a date, and I'd see like a pawn and a rook on her face. I'd be overlaying chess pieces on people's faces, like my brain. What my brain was bringing to the world was amazing, and I didn't share that at the time. I didn't think it'd be that sexy. Now I'm kind of wishing I did. Who knows? I could have gone. Yeah, like Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. If you live bikes, you can find all the lessons in bikes. When I was flying hang gliders and paragliding, I'd start seeing life as like upward spirals and taking a thermal, or you get in sync and you're going down. I'd start to see patterns and metaphors. Surfing, if you're really into surfing or snowboarding, you can find how it relates to the patterns in life. And that's been really fun. It hasn't happened for me lately. Now it's just pure transformation and personal growth and communication. How does all that look? It's not really related to, I'm not sure that I have one of those hobbies right now. My hobby right now is training. It's doing interviews like this on podcasts and sharing messages. So everything's occurring in that frame. Whereas, yeah, if I was doing one of those things again, like diving into Frisbee, then everything starts to look like that.
So are you training your ability to give interviews?
Wow. No, except unless you consider repetition in itself to be training, which of course it is. So I guess in that sense, but I'm just doing it. Like, there was something like piano. I'm not creating a training program for myself. I'm just trying to play Bohemian Rhapsody over and over for the last 6 years on the piano. So I'm kind of doing that with the podcast. But I think I am training myself to train others, because I keep on being called towards all opportunities to grow in that area. I've just co-led 3 trainings in 3.5 weeks, and I'm talking 2-day trainings. And in the previous 15 years, I might have done that once.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because you are sort of reinventing a same career you've done before. You were #1 on Google for life coach, and you had the world's largest coaching business, and I don't know exactly how many years ago that was. Maybe what I'd be curious about is, you built that business, 15 years ago, I think, and then now you're sort of building a similar business now. Like, what are you doing differently, and how are you pivoting? And
yeah, it's a massive pivot. What happened is I started coaching back in '98, right? When a lot of people hadn't heard of coaching, and then quickly I started gravitating towards helping coaches, because people would come to me and say, "How are you doing this? How do you have clients in 5 countries? And how are you #1 on the search engines? And how do you get clients?" And I realized people are willing to pay to start a business, even more than they're willing to have their relationships be great, or their health be great, or their life be great. They're willing to pay for something that will help them make money. So I became the coach's coach, and building the world's largest coaching business, that came about when Alex Mandosian was asking me about my mailing list. And at the time, I had 150,000 people, coaches and wannabe coaches on my mailing list. And he said, "You are the world's largest provider to the coaching industry." And I hadn't realized that, but I guess at the time that was true. So that's how that happened. But what happened, I went into information products, and I created CDs, DVDs, published a book, and ebooks, and I did all that, and I became that guy serving coaches through automated means. I have a natural flair for marketing. But what happened is I got burned out. I'd done it. I'd said everything I had to say about getting clients, and also working with people on BizOp. I didn't even know that was a term, but business opportunity. 80% of them aren't going to make it. They're just not going to push through, and they're not going to make it. And I can't ask them for a lot of money for something that is likely to not happen. It just wasn't satisfying for me. So I felt burned out, and went to Bali. That was part of that, where I met you. And Bali was good for a while, but then I was basically slowly dying. For 8 months, I played video games for 8 hours a day. That was my life. And fortunately, I got kicked out of Bali. Life booted me out of Bali in a hurry. I mean, I had hours notice to leave Bali, and I had a little income there with renting out one of my rooms to other people, cover the rent. And then I had to leave Bali, and I'm like, what am I going to do for money? I can live on savings for a few years, but that doesn't feel good. Keep going backwards. I have to actually make money again. And it was my buddy Ezra Firestone who said, Why don't you go back to coaching? You're a great coach, and I'll send an email for you. And Ezra's like, his businesses are bringing in 25 million a year. He's got a massive email list. Someone like that says, I'll send an email for you. You don't pass that up. And so I pivoted based on that. I had to create something new, and I'm like, I've missed the one-on-one. I missed that connection. All those internet products, those information products took me away from feeling like I'm making a difference. And for 20 years, I've been saying, I want to do live stuff. I want to do workshops. I want to sit on a couch and people bring their problems and I coach them. I've been wanting to do that. But this other thing was, I was really good at it and it was making money. Even the book that I wrote, Get Paid for Who You Are, I've wanted to write a book called Men Are Dumb and Women Are Mean. I wanted to write that book about what I'd learned about some of the shadow sides of the genders, but people weren't calling for that. They wanted to know how I had this lifestyle where I can live anywhere in the world and choose my own hours. So I wrote the book, Get Paid for Who You Are. And in a way, I'm grateful for the burnout because it got me out of this thing that was working. And now I love coaching. I love my clients. I had a session this morning. I don't know what's going to happen. It's so unknown. She's in another country. She's traveling, and she speaks, and I listen, and I hear that she's conflicted. She wants to go to the next level of success, but she doesn't believe she deserves it. And I'm like, wow. And then I Googled this quote about who are you not to shine your light? And I had goosebumps all over my body while I'm reading out the quote to her. And then I gave her an assignment for voice dialogue so she can have the different parts of herself have a conversation and have some integration. I didn't plan that. That's not in a book I read. I love the clarity and being able to serve people to go to where they really want to be. So that's the pivot. And now who I'm working with, I figured I only want to work with 15 people. And right now I just realized I've got 13 clients. So if I'm only going to work with 15 people, they may as well be amazing, successful. They've already got a track record of success. Most areas of their life are going great, and they want to up level. They're executives, they're entrepreneurs, they're leaders, so they can impact others, and they want to up level, and they're hungry to learn authentic relating skills, communication skills, leadership skills. They want to grow themselves and deepen connection. Those are my dream clients.
There's something that stood out to me of what you were talking about with this client and your session this morning that I want to point out, which is that you were able to like pull a quote and weave that into your session and then sort of make up the right exercise for her on the fly. And that's indicative of, you know, like you're being creative within the context of this conversation, but you have to get to a highly skilled place mastery before you can sort of like bring that creativity in on the fly. And I wouldn't expect necessarily even myself to have access to all that given, you know, your breadth of experience. So, you know, I just want to point out for the listener that that's an example of the cool things that are possible when you have this stable foundation of knowledge and skill in
the mastery. Yeah. Perhaps I hadn't seen that. I hadn't seen it like that before. People. I was just asked on another podcast, what's your structure? What's your program? What do you take people through? Well, I don't do that. I don't have you take an assessment. I don't go through a program. I listen. And it just occurred to me as you're speaking, the number of data points is mind-blowing. It's unfathomable. Like all the different data that's coming in from them, including their body language and what they've told me about the past and what they want. And they tell me like 7 things that seem unrelated.
Yes.
And then all the data points of my experience and the tools and the quotes and what teachers have said and my own experience is just mind-blowing. And my job, which no computer can yet do, is to weave all that together and find the patterns and the connections that are going to move that person forward. I love it. Sometimes I'm just open, feeling my body open, waiting for something to impact me. It's
Mm.
incredible space versus the left brain stuff, which I was taught and I learned for the first 27 years, because I was a consulting actuary to Fortune 50 companies. So the left brain stuff of just like a structure and do this and whatever
Yes.
I'm a big fan of that. But then there's intuition and there's softening and there's a whole other world. And I feel uncomfortable. I feel out of my depth speaking like this because I come more from that left brain lineage. And so it's kind of new for me to speak about intuition and the subconscious jumping in and information. It almost feels like, I don't know what channeling is, but it almost feels like that sometimes. It's something just occurs to me with such clarity. And I get so excited. And the client goes, yes, that's it. And that's super fun. Hadn't occurred to me that comes from 20 years of practicing something and mastery.
I'm curious how, because there's these labels like business coach, life coach, whatever coach, but it's like there is no process to what you're doing. So how do you put a label on it? Like I can help anybody because I'm amazing, or like how do you talk about it?
It's been so frustrating for me for the last 2 years. It's like, how do I chunk down and limit and almost damn what I do by trying to communicate it? The way that works for me right now is that I feel like the bridge between business coaching and life coaching. So you've got your work life and you've got your life. And to try and compartmentalize and think that you're two separate people is kind of ridiculous. Because how you do one thing in a way is how we do everything.
Yes.
Like if you're not listening to your team at work, if you're not having humility to really listen, and I put myself in that, I've got so much arrogance, I put myself in that boat. You might not be listening to your partner. You might not be listening to your friends and to your kids. So I consider myself, with all the years of training I have as an actuary and systems and geek and just business, that I can do that. But there are thousands of people who can do that. Last 20 years I've spent increasing my emotional intelligence, my ability to connect and to grow myself. There are also thousands of people that can do that. I consider myself one of that rare breed that can straddle the two and bring what's necessary, whether it's some board meeting or it's a conversation with your kid.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's tricky for branding. I'll acknowledge that.
It's tricky for branding, but it it's cool to have that sort of that rare overlap between skill sets and like all of a sudden, I talked a little bit about this in superconductors. You have this stack of skills, and all of a sudden you're the only person in the world that has this exact blend of skills, and you become super rare and valuable.
Yeah, that sounds right. And some skills we don't even know we have. Like, it's so natural. You don't even think about it as a superpower. You've pointed out one to me today. Someone said, what are you really good at that most people aren't? I wouldn't have said learning. I'm really good at learning. If I want to learn something, I'm going to dive into it 10 times faster than most people. I hadn't seen that as a skill. You've pointed that out to me.
How about that?
Yeah.
Let's talk about daring. I know that's something that you are talking about more these days, and that ties in a lot with people that listen to this show. They're coming up with some adventure, or they're starting a business, or maybe they see like something coming down the pipe in the future, like they think the world's going to change this way and they want to act on it, but no one's ever done anything before. So when you're in one of these situations where you're like facing big unknowns, where do you start with people that are interested in that?
Where do I start with someone
who's
has a
trying
big
to do
unknown,
something?
something that's scary?
Yeah, and there's this balance between this is super exciting. I could be the first person in the world to do this, and I'm nervous. I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know who to ask for help. All these big
Yeah.
unknowns.
Yeah. Wow. You've asked a rich question, and it has a rich answer. Firstly, we come back to the whole point that I don't have a structure, right? So it's really I'm going to be listening for what's in the way. And an example is one of the clients that I mentioned wants to triple business profits and give 50% of all profits to animal welfare shelters. That's her goal. And it's overwhelming. As I listen to it, she's overwhelmed. She's like, I got so many ideas and I'm not really sure what direction to go in. And then I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to triple profits. I don't know if I get a foundation or if I get a charity, or do I partner with a foundation or a charity? And then what would it be called? Like, again, there's so many data points. It's just swimming in it. So it's natural that it's overwhelming. So perhaps one thing I could do first is get that, be someone who witnesses that, the feeling of overwhelm, really almost experience it with her, and have that be welcomed, so that she can at least rest in, all right, I feel overwhelmed, and that's okay.
Yeah, and when people have done that for me, when they're like, "Ooh, yeah, totally get that," you're like, "Okay, I'm not crazy. This is normal." And yeah, and then you can be like, take a breath and sort of settle down, and then start thinking about actually like doing things.
Yeah, and before we get to doing, the next step with her was the planning, like the visioning. Let's go broad before we narrow down. So let's even get scattered, and I could feel it. I even said to her, wow, I feel scattered with all these ideas, and that's okay. We're going to come back and we're going to chunk it down. So we brainstorm and dream about how it could look and what it could be called. We did some different branding. We looked at different models, like just pure fundraising versus making the money in the business and then donating that. We looked at cause marketing. And one thing that I think was a gift to her was my excitement. She got my excitement. I really got this. She's got her own radio show. This woman's a powerful woman. She's got stuff handled. She's just never had to do better. Now she wants to do better for the cats and dogs that are going to be killed. So while this is all happening, the coach part of mine is kind of navigating. I kind of know where we're going. So she's a bit, lost in the whatever, but I'm tracking where we're heading. And then we chunk it down. All right, let's at least let's get less scattered now and come up with the questions that we have. We're not going to solve them all right now. Do you have a foundation or a charity? There's research required on that. You're going to need a legal consultation. You're going to want a logo. You're going to want at least a web page that explains this, even for you, to get clear. So we chunked it down to some steps. And I feel myself taking a breath right now because I got a little scattered and tense just talking about all that stuff. But then we chunked it down and she had a direction. She had some things to do for that week. And that seemed to really help her. And then she'd flip-flop. She'd go through periods of high, like she'd text me, I'm on fire. And then she'd be like, wow, I just crashed. Like, what am I doing? I can't do all this. So that's exciting to me because once you set the goal, your resistance and sabotage is going to come up. But I roll my sleeves up. Bring it. We want that with me witnessing. So it's not in the shadows. And let's see, like now we've got these different components of her that are conflicted. I want people to be comfortable. I don't want to outshine people. Wow. All right. Let's dig into that. So you could create a process in a book for that. But again, everyone's different, and I want to tune into what's alive in the moment.
And speaking about that roller coaster of like, I'm on fire and I'm crashing, a lot of my friends and myself go through that. Like, oh my gosh, everyone's saying yes to me. Like, all the dominoes are falling. And then the next week, no one's calling you back. Like, things just aren't working. Like, the idea is a bust. And, like, there's all kinds of different explanations to, like, that's just statistics, or it's Mercury in retrograde, or it's like you're not getting enough sleep. Do you have anything to say about just that pattern of fire to frustration and managing that?
Well, we started this call with vulnerability. We talked about feeling uncomfortable, and it can feel so lousy to do a launch and no one buys. I'm working with a nonprofit now for the prison training prison inmates. And they did a launch and expected a lot of funding, a lot of donations, and it was just dribbles of money, and it can feel soul crushing to have that happen. So I think it really takes some faith. But not blind faith. So there's a balance. I wish I could remember the quote. I just read, we're responsible for dreaming and holding the vision of what's possible, and we're responsible for realism, to know when to pull out that this is a crappy marketing method, or it's a crappy product, or I'm not the right person to be doing this. We need both of those. So, for example, with the podcasting, right? I started doing podcast interviews over the last 6 months, and the first 3 or 4 months, it took a lot of faith, because the recordings are happening, but people aren't publishing them yet. And then when they did publish them, I thought I'd get a whole bunch of people requesting a session, and initially that wasn't happening. I had to I think, change the offer and tweak it. And I'm paying $2,500 a month to an assistant to pitch podcast shows. So I just had to really assess it. Do I believe in this method? Do I think this is the right way? And am I loving it? And I really am loving it. It's so much fun for me. So I'm like, I have faith that this is right. I'm going to do this for at least 6 months. And if I'm not getting the results, then I'll pivot. I'll switch. And then a wonderful client came out of nowhere. Out of a tiny podcast with, I imagine that there's very little following, someone who doesn't really market that much, wonderful client. I'm like, wow. All right, well, where there's one, there could be two. So I went along, and then another client appeared who has a story so close to mine, it's crazy. And she's like, I want to learn from you. So she came up, and then this dream client that wants to save animals. I'm like, yes, if I can get paid and save animals at the same time, I'm in heaven. That's for me. So that's enough to then I hired a second assistant. All right, I'm going to double down and invest this money and just expanding this. So it's really taking some faith to be persistent through what Seth Godin calls the dip. I highly recommend that book, The Dip by Seth Godin. Just such a simple thing, like recognizing, all right, I'm in a dip here. Do I have what it takes? Am I willing to spend the resources, time and energy and money to get through this dip to the good bit where I'm going to get all the rewards?
Yeah, I love that you're reinvesting and sort of like this may be another Seth Godin-ism, like accelerating the flywheel, or maybe a Jim Collins reference. Now, too many books to keep track of, but yeah, like slowly accelerating this heavy thing, and then eventually it's got all this momentum and just keeps going. Yeah,
a woman I'm working with right now, Lori Lazar, she's responsible for me training inmates in prisons. And she was cold calling prisons. They're like calling up a prison. We've got this training that'll help people be more human and connect with each other. I think it's going to reduce recidivism. It's going to reduce violence. Just cold calling prisons. And now, 6 to 12 months later, we just went and trained prison staff from 20 different prisons in Colorado to show them what we're doing. and now they're already putting their hands up saying, we want you to come into our prison. I'm just amazed at the, I'm still looking for a metaphor. Is it chutzpah? What's the word?
Like the grit?
The grit. Let's say the grit and the persistence and the passion of her to just keep on calling, right? Getting no one calling back. Cold calling generally isn't very fun. And then she gets that one person who responded to a voicemail saying, oh my God, this is what I've been looking for. And brings her in, and then it goes to another prison, then another prison, and it just, now we're training prison staff, and who knows where it's going to go. Just really acknowledge that grit that it took her and that faith.
That also reminds me of Derek Sivers' concept of the first follower and the importance of that first person who gets it and is like, yes, come do this. And then you have, then you have proof of concept, then you have done it once, and you can point to that and say, here's what we did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, like for me, the first podcast interview I did, that's and having the person say, I wouldn't change anything. That was great. Like, oh, really? It's like the first follower. And then using that as a referral source for other hosts, and then it starts expanding. And then I just got a testimonial. This is like as you build it, right? You build the followers. Got a testimonial from John L. Dumas. Do you know him?
Yeah. Everybody knows John Lee Dumas.
Right, John Lee. I said, I was on his podcast, and I said, look, would you write a paragraph on how it was to have me? My God, it was better than I would have written for myself. And now then you use that. So yeah, your first follower, and I strongly believe, and I may write a book on it, in the snowballing effect. Maybe this is what you meant by the flywheel, but if it's not growing, you going in the dip, and you're in the dip, and you're in the dip, and you're in the dip, and no one's responding. Well, do you really want to be a Walt Disney? Like, do you really want to be someone who approaches 126 banks, or a Jack Canfield who approaches 150 or 300 publishers? Like, do you really want that to be your life? You've got to know when to pull out. But if you do persist and you get that first follower and you get enough glimmers, and what you have really is good. If you really believe it and other people are like, no, this is hot, this is different, this is good, then there's a snowballing effect as other people hear about it. And then you get more introductions, and then you're just known. Like you said, everybody knows John Lee Dumas, right? He's so, now he can springboard from that to who knows. All from the first follower. That's good. I like that.
This is fun. There's one more thought that I was having. There's just like often this sequence of like, if you have that first follower and then they make a referral to someone else, and then that person sends you to two more, and it's like following this chain of interactions, this chain of people. And maybe it's like a branching chain, or maybe it's just like a bunch of introductions till you finally get the thing that you wanted in the first place. But it's often like a chain of human connection.
Yeah. And boy, this faith concept, I was never a person who talks about faith. I'm not religious. But a year ago, I rejoined the Transformational Leadership Council. I'm thinking I want high-level clients. These people like Jack Canfield and John Gray and Marianne Williamson used to be in it. I'm like, I rejoined thinking this will be an investment in my career. Well, I got 0 clients out of the $4,000 and the week it took for me to go and do the conference, right? Mm-hmm. Since then, I think 1 client may have come in by me being on someone's podcast. So that's a result. But it's so tiny and it took so long. You got to keep assessing. Is this a good bet? Is the probability good? Is it worth the investment? I said, yeah. So keep paying my dues, went to a second event, and next month I'm going to a camp of entrepreneurs who sometimes go and hang out with Richard Branson on Necker Island. And I'm going to be speaking and sharing my message, which I think we might get to talk about, of daring. Oh, we've already started about daring. I'm going to get to share that. That could pay for the investment 100-fold.
Mm-hmm.
But that's more than a year after I decided to go and do that. So there's a dip of going through, and there's a faith that's required. And I think it could all explode. That's what the vision that I'm holding. And hey, if it doesn't work, at some point I'll cut it. I might stop paying one of my assistants. I said, it depends on what happens this month. I might have to pause on the investment until we see more results. So I guess kind of monitoring the investment the whole time. And
so if perseverance is so key and riding it through the dip, and also knowing when to fold them,
yes,
then like these are two important concepts that are in opposition, sort of. So I would guess that most people don't persevere enough. But how do you think about that balance between those two concepts?
I agree. I would think that for most of us, as humans, human nature is, I think the human mind is like a monkey on crack. Basically, just zips all over the place, and we're rewarded by short-term results, and that's fine. I validate that. I love short-term results. Some of us might want to just orient that way. Don't start a business that'll take 2 years to see a result. Some people don't. That you're just not kind of built that way, and it might be hard for you to do that. You might be someone who starts a bunch of things and get paid for that, or coaches people through it. So there might be some natural skills that comes in. Are you a perseverer or not? But if there's something you really, really want, it's possible that you might bail early. So what you could do is look for structures to support you. This client, again, with the animal welfare, she knows herself. She knows that she can get really excited, then fizzle out. Me too. I can get crazy pumped up for a week, and then if I don't get enough reward, I was going to do a documentary and interview 100 people on their deathbed. I still hold it as a possibility, but I made calls, and I was trying to enroll people, get a film crew, and get permission to go into a retirement home, and I just didn't get. I even reached out to the guy, the only person in the world who's done a study even closely related to this, a professor, and he said, I'll be your academic advisor. Like, I got this thing.
Oh, cool.
And I'm still open to finding the right person that says, yeah, I'll come film that. Or I know someone who want you to come and do that with the people they care for. But I lost it. I fizzled out. So this client with the animal welfare, she knows that about herself. So she's got me. Let's look at what's, like, now that you're feeling the fizzle, let's just get to know yourself there. What's in the way? Maybe a reminder of the spark. I have been known to be uncommonly perseverant. Is that a word?
Yeah,
it is
sure
now.
Is.
Yeah. I had a friend say to me, "Look, when you said you were going to create a coach training school, I didn't say anything, but I didn't think you were going to do it." And now that school trains people in 90 countries around the world. But there are loads of things I fizzle on, so it can be both. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I agree most people could use more perseverance to at least find out if that's going to be joy for you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other side, I do want to touch on the other side. So there's the rare person that's just, I got a friend, did a startup, put everything into it, loved it, was so passionate about it, so I consider that a win for him. But he kept going, and I started hearing, can't get funding. Now there are copycats. Copying what I'm doing. Frustrating. And then one of them got funding. Mm-hmm. Right? Heartbreaking. And he's putting so much into it. he had to pull the plug at one point. And I can't tell you if he went too far. He lost a lot of his savings, but he loved it and he went for it. So I respect that. But now he's got something else that he loves, he's passionate about, will help the world. Man, it's not easy to get funding. No one's done it. He's been at it for a year and a half, and when I hear him speak, he's not, here it is. Here's the test. He's not speaking with passion and joy. That's the thing. He's just kind of a little bit drained, a little bit down, he's a little bit frustrated for 6 months now. So also, here's the other thing. He's got no other income source, so he's eating into savings, and that's getting low. So I keep saying, bite the bullet, go and get a damn job, even if it's waiting tables. Like, he's a former hedge fund manager, right? Get yourself a job so the income's coming in, and have this be a hobby, so you don't have the pressure and the stress. And you only go through the dip if you have the resources to go through the dip, and if you can find joy.
Yeah, and the resources could be like friends and family supporting you. They could be, savings. They could be whatever they might be to go through the dip.
Yeah. And at a meta level, I want to name what I think just happened. That's not a structure. That's not something that I have a book and I'm going to do 0.7 now in the coaching session. That's something that you and I just realized, or I realized. You helped me come to some clarity about one way to test if you should still be doing something or let go of it. And I just love how that can come out of the space between us.
Yeah, and it's so clear. And you, like, when I myself am not speaking with passion and joy, I can tell, because I'm like, this sounds boring as I'm saying it. You're like, I really know this stuff, so I know this is great information, but I don't actually want to talk about it.
Right. Yeah, right. I get lit up by clarity, by revealing things, by seeing. Yeah. I just asked someone yesterday who's an expert facilitator, what do you do when someone's talking too much in the group? What do you do? Because we tried interrupting and saying, look, we've got a lot to move through and we want to hear a lot of voices. So can you wrap that up with a sentence or two? And he felt really shamed. Mm-hmm. And that became a whole thing. And then some people jumped to his defense and they're like, that's rude. And so we said, what do you do? And he said, well, you have to be loving them. You have to be welcoming him as it happens. If you've got any irritation about it, they're going to feel that. Mm-hmm. And it just occurs to me like Moses coming down from the mountain with the tablets. It's like so clear. So I spot truth and clarity when it happens, and it's just such a joy for me. I'm like, you just nailed it. He said, I've only got 3 minutes to talk. I put him on speakerphone. I said, go. He said that. We're like, that's exactly what was missing. We were irritated, and he felt it. Boom. So I think I have an ability to spot value when it appears in our session or in a training. Someone might even say something, and people may not have noticed it. So I'll pull out the piece that strikes me as gold. And I hadn't seen that as a skill either until this conversation. So you're helping me pull out the things that I'm good at, that I just do. I hadn't seen it as a thing.
Wonderful. So I have one more question, and I think we can move towards wrapping. But you talked about the visioning process, using that client example and sort of like going broad and sort of scattering. That process it's often really fun, but often like we're thinking within what we know, or we're thinking inside the box. And so, or we have these rules where it's like, you think of a thought, and you're like, then you immediately delete it because it's not reasonable, or like there's some rule that it's not allowed for you to do that thing or even think about doing that thing. So we actually probably throw out a lot of ideas even without allowing ourselves to put them on paper or things like that. So I'd be curious if you have any insight into the visioning process that allows sort of fully exploring even when things are kind of like crazy or unreasonable ideas.
Well, I think I have a comment on the problem, and we'll see if something comes up about an insight on the solution. I think what you're starting to get into is what you don't know. Like you might have limitations happening that you're not even aware of.
Yes.
If you were a fish and I said, "How's the water?" you might respond, "What water?"
Yes.
You're swimming in it. I didn't know that I had a skill around learning skills. I wasn't conscious that I had this ability to pull out truth and wisdom when I see it. What's an example of something you don't know? Something you don't know how to do?
Yeah, so I don't know how to run a major international conference.
All right, great. So there's a bunch of stuff, I don't know how to do brain surgery. It's a bunch of stuff we don't know. What's an example of something you don't know that you don't know?
Can't come up with one.
Exactly. So that's the rub. When we're trying to envision or trying to improve our life, we don't even know the water we're swimming in. We can't see those things. So how do we break through into this thing that cannot be known? Because we don't even know to ask. We don't. I just as someone interviewed me just today, and he said, "I've read nonviolent communication and discovered that all of my communication was violent." Now, before reading the book, he couldn't have asked anybody, "How violent or peaceful is my communication?" It wasn't on his radar. Mm-hmm. So how do you break into that area? I think one way is to there's reading books. That's like the lowest level. Reading books, listening to podcasts is great. That can point to things. You can have an aha moment. The next level up, I see two support mechanisms. One is a course, doing some kind of immersion, 2 or 3 days. Go and do the Landmark Forum by Landmark Education. That'll blow your mind. The other is to get a coach. And I am a coach, so I'm sure I'm biased in that direction. But a coach can spot things that you wouldn't have even seen. Like, oh, you've got some conflicted parts. I could feel this part and I could feel this part. Have they ever spoken to each other? Now she knows she doesn't know. And then she's getting close to knowing that she knows. And maybe I'll spot that if someone's like, maybe I'll feel like they're not really going big enough. Like, well, if we were just dreaming, what would that look like? I might be able to give permission and a push.
Yeah, permission.
And I notice I'm wishing I had, like a 4-point plan that I could tell you for someone who's got limitations on their visioning. But I don't. Again, it's more I listen and then something comes.
I'll do that. I'll come up with a 4-point plan for visioning, and then we can share it.
You run it past me. I love stuff like that.
So is there anything that we haven't touched on that you think is important for the listener to hear from you?
Yeah, I'm a geek. I'm a geek about communication and vulnerability and deep connection. It's something I didn't grow up with, and I've spent the last 20 years researching that and studying it and practicing. And we just did an exercise with this group of prison staff where we had them practice withholds. Like the first thing, a withhold is anything you haven't said to somebody. Mm-hmm. Like, I had one about the person driving me recently that I felt like she was driving too fast and too close to cars. And I wasn't saying anything because I didn't know how to say it. That's a withhold.
Okay.
Right. My ex-girlfriend, I didn't like how she treated me when we broke up. That's a withhold. We got loads of withholds. If you think about your boss, your kid, things you wish people would do, things where you felt betrayed or disappointed, or even something you love that they do and you just haven't told them because it might be a little awkward. Even the fact that you love them. First time I told my mother at the age of 23, 27, I love you. Huge withhold. One of the hardest things I've ever said in my life. We didn't say that in our family. So one thing I'd like to leave listeners with is just my passion for, firstly, practicing trying to notice and catch when you have a withhold. I have a withhold. You may not decide to say it. You might feel too chicken, or you might think that the risk is too high. That's different. But first, notice where you have something you haven't said with somebody. And if you have an issue with anyone, you're not fully feeling love with anybody in your life, you just get a piece of paper, write their name down at the top, say, what have I withheld? Like if I was about to die and I had a minute to say anything that I felt was between us, just make a list. So become aware of withholds. And this is you could do a 2-day training just on this. Once you become aware, find a way, if you can, to gently and vulnerably share that withhold if you feel like there's a chance it might bring you closer. And there's an art to it, and there are steps to that. And maybe we'll do that on the next episode.
There you go. I love the plugging for episode number 5 already. No, I think everybody can relate to that withhold. And I really appreciate that. And
to tie it to our topic, that requires a massive amount of daring. Any withhold I've said is, I just called somebody today and I said, look, this group that you lead, I know there's a requirement that you go to an introduction night before you come. That's a requirement to get in. And I realized I've been coming for 8 months. I kind of haven't done an introduction night. I kind of just snuck in. That was a bit edgy for me. Mm-hmm. Admitting that I'm here under false pretenses. I said, and I won't be in town for the next intro night. So do you want me to not? And I'm hosting them. I'm hosting some of them. I said, do you want me to not come? You can even host them at my house and I will leave. What do you want to do? And she said, I'm going to make the call that it's fine, and we'll see if we can set up one for you privately. And I really love that you brought it. That's an example of a withhold, and it takes daring each time to do it. And don't do it if it feels too much and it's too edgy. But if you're feeling like being a bit daring, then write down those withholds and go and practice sharing one. You might blow it the first few times. You really might blow it, but you'll get better.
That's exciting, though. It's exciting to think about and like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be daring. It's a practice, being daring is you have to be up for it every time. So it's like, okay, you got to practice it. Yeah.
One woman in the training where we did this withhold exercise, we had people do withholds with a stand-in. You don't even have to do the withholds with the person involved if you don't want to. Mm-hmm. Have them do it with a stand-in. She said, I said something out loud that I haven't said to anybody, and I've held on to it for 22 years, and I feel lighter.
Wow.
Yeah. We'll call it an advanced practice to go and do it with the real person. You could do it with someone else. I just want to get this off my chest. And then once that's done, it might be even easier to go and do it with the person.
Yeah, I feel like there's a whole conversation here. So I'll put it in my my locker to see when we have this on the show again.
Sure.
So, David, where can people find you and learn more about what you do?
Thank you. Well, my website is playforreal.life. It's not .com, it's .life, L-I-F-E, play for real. And the way I'd like, you can subscribe to my podcast if you like. But the way I really like to connect with people and the way I find who's the right client to work with long term is I do discovery sessions. I offer discovery sessions and I don't charge for that. And if you want to do the session and we create a plan for your life and business and you want to go off and implement that on your own, that's fine with me. I'm absolutely not attached to that. I hope you'll let me know how it goes. But if both of us feel that coaching could have a big impact on your goals, then I may invite you to be a client. And that's totally up to you. So there's a big button right at the top of the website, playforreal.life, that says request a session. You can't miss it. And even if you're feeling a little shy, like, well, I like this, I like what you're saying, kind of want to do it, but I'm not ready to get on the phone, go through the process anyway, because there's a 5-minute life assessment and you'll get great information about your life. And then if you decide to actually book something on my calendar, we'll review those results when we create your plan.
Sweet. Love it. David, always a pleasure. Great conversation. I was super into it. Yeah, thanks for coming on. I'm sure we'll be in touch and keep me posted about all the prison work. That's something I'm surprisingly interested in.
Yep. Well, that might be episode 7. I'm shameless. Yeah, thank you. And man, I'm really surprised, pleased that I learned a lot about myself. This was a real self-discovery session for me, and I appreciate your attention and your inquiry. That was a gift. Thank you.
Thanks, man. All right, David Wood. And there we have it. Another great episode from David Wood in the books, number 4. Thank you for listening to the entire episode. And if you're the type of person that likes to help others, then please share this with your friends and family. If you found value, then they probably will too. So please share it on your social media channels. And if you have questions, I'm here to help. Send me questions or a message if you're curious about working together at derek@derekloudermilk.com. That's my email. And I have a personal request. I think we are all here to help each other. And so together, let's help more people. Let's get this content into more people's hands. So if you would leave an iTunes review for the show, then this will help boost the show up in the rankings, and more people will be able to find the show and learn about this stuff. That's all for today's episode. Now it's your turn to go out there and be adventurous.